We're on. Well, you can. Oh, should I? Hello, everyone. We've got this down now.
Ish.
So we're here answering your questions from Monday the 1st and Wednesday the 3rd of June, and this is going out Friday of that week. We're going to start with a little bit of kind of general admin and news, and then we're going to get right into your questions. So do you want to start with?
No, you start with the course.
Okay, so we are putting the course together, which is Dad's painting course, and we're hoping that we're going to be able to go live with this on Monday the 15th, and that we can put them up for sale on Monday the 8th. We are going to have 10 students only for this first course, which is going to be 6 weeks, 6 modules. And this is really kind of the first time we've done anything like this, so it's going to be live with Dad. The courses after this will probably be predominantly recorded, but this first one is going to be 10 students only with Dad, learning how to make a painting from the idea to the finished piece. It's going to be done with sort of like these live sessions, so once a week for an hour Dad will give a live tutoring session. He'll give you an assignment and then feedback on your assignment. That's why we can only do 10 people. We're going to put up the course description, the materials you need, and the price, which we've pretty much decided on, but that will all be going up on Monday, and we will tell you on Monday what time. We're thinking, I mean, we want the people who watch the live videos to have first dibs, so if you can join us on Monday, we'll tell you. It's going up now. Join now. Because there are going to be very few places, but it's going to be a really important start, because the first 10 people are going to be the ones who help us develop this and then expand on it to offer to more people. Is there anything else we need to say about that? So just basically join us on Monday, and hopefully we'll have all of the stuff together by then. And if you have time, if you want to join, it should be starting from the 15th, and get in.
Okay, we finished the last Q&A with a question about socialist architecture, which I understood exactly what was meant, and I thought we would expand upon it today, but it's almost a subject in itself, so I thought I'd step back from that and talk about it when we do the session on architecture specifically. So for today, we're not going to go back to that question. We're going to treat it in the section on architecture, which hopefully will also be next week.
So what happens that's really great is we get a lot of ideas for both live talks and courses from your comments and questions. And probably going to have a lot to go on here. So shall we start?
Go for it, girl.
Okay. James asks, have you ever experimented with vacuum forming to make plastic shells off a clay or foam sculpture? It seems like that might be a great fit for the organic shapes of Roger's architecture.
Well, the simple answer to that is we've done a great deal of work in that direction, not just for the architecture, but we did a lot of experimental work with vacuum forming, and in fact Martin did a lot more than me. The first retreat pods he built were essentially blown without a mould, and he got these perfect egg shapes by blowing holes through a carved shape in a former. So blowing rather than vacuum forming, but exactly the same principle. In the end, we've looked at all kinds of technologies, from inflatable molds through to more recently 3D printing. We have a technique, which I'm not going to enlarge on now, which is incredibly accurate, relatively simple. For the moment, it beats anything else. So it's a good idea. Don't forget, my background isn't painting. My background is pretty much industrial design, and we looked at a lot of technologies. Thank you for the idea, though.
Randy asks, oh, this one's for me, sorry. Freya, is there a piece of advice or action from your father that continually inspires you as an artist?
Question.
I should have thought about this more than I did.
Told you to.
I got some ideas already.
She never listened.
Which in itself is a way of...
She watched, but she never wanted me to interfere by giving her advice. And I think that was a good thing in the end.
For Freya, Dad, this question is for Freya.
I know, but I didn't think you would say that.
What I would say that I've noticed since I've been back is this isn't really specifically to do with painting exactly, but there isn't a minute of the day where Dad seems to not be working on something, and for better or worse, that is sort of contagious. And it can be really exciting and sort of invigorating, and you sort of think, I can't sit down, there's this thing, there's this idea, we could do this and we could do that. And it may be that we're in lockdown and we haven't got any other choice, but I think that's definitely something that I've got from Dad, is that kind of, if I'm not doing anything, I can at least be having an idea about something. And that can get exhausting, so you have to find ways of counteracting that, definitely, I think. For me, that would probably be running and reading. But that kind of idea of, well, there's always something you can do and be working on, I would say I got from Dad. And obviously, like watching him, I picked up lots of different things, but I couldn't tell you specifically what it was, because it's just sort of by osmosis, really. Drips over the years of seeing bits and bobs and different things. And both my parents, Mum too. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, I am. I wouldn't have asked you that question. I wouldn't have dared.
Tom asked, I love your rock formations. Have you visited Lone Pine, California, or the Trona Pinnacles?
Well, questions like that really have to be yes or no. And the answer to that is, thank you very much. No, but I've made a note when I went through the questions earlier, and I will check them out next time I'm in the vicinity.
Lots of your kind of trees are from California, though, like Point Lobos.
Yeah, there's another question in there which asks, have I ever seen anything in the real world that looked like mine? And I was at the second ever TED conference, and it was in Monterey, but we were staying in Carmel and driving into Monterey for the conference every day. And it was really interesting because we did the 16-mile drive, and as we were driving there in the mist, because it was very misty, there was a lot of those pine trees, and I was with Kai, and Kai said, "These look like your paintings," and I laughed and I said, "They do." And when we were at the conference, we were given a goodie bag, and in the goodie bag there was a magazine called Creative Review, and by wonderful coincidence it had a photograph of a pine tree on a golf course on the 17-mile drive between Carmel and Monterey, and it said, "It looks like God stole from Roger Dean." I was very amused, but it was, well, of course I copied the pine trees. They were portraits. They were and are to this day portraits.
So the next question, and I think it might give away this person's angle if I tell you their name, is from Jeff Lorescent. Jeff Lorescent asks,
This is his 700th question.
have you ever experimented with invisible fluorescent acrylic paint?
I didn't answer the other 600, but the answer is no. You keep asking me. I'm curious, but the answer is no. Thank you for introducing the idea.
Okay, so Carol asks, are you inspired by the skies at night? For instance, last night Jupiter and Saturn were so bright.
There's a great many things that inspire me that don't in fact turn up in my paintings. And the sky at night in England is occasionally fabulous, but it's not often clear. We have a lot of interesting atmosphere that makes for great aerial perspective, but it sometimes makes skies at night hard things to observe in all the beauty and clarity. But having been in the desert at night and seen that unbelievable clarity, it's fabulous and awe-inspiring. I haven't painted it, but I've loved seeing it. So I would say, yes, very inspirational. Never directly influenced a painting.
Except, I thought that you'd said that the astrological signs of the Yes Band members were in.
They were. That was from an astrology book, not from staring at the stars.
Okay, so Peter Groves asks, sorry, sometimes I'm saying the surname and sometimes I'm not.
Go for it. Don't worry about it.
Have you ever spent time in Africa, and if so, what were your impressions? Has it influenced your work?
The answer is I visited Africa several times, not to live, just to visit. I was awestruck by the animals, as you would be. Actually, I was awestruck too by how it required a different way of seeing, because at first I couldn't see them. And we had a guide, and I said, so where are the animals? He said, everywhere. I couldn't see them. And then suddenly it clicked. And they were right there. And I wasn't seeing them. And that fascinated me. The fact that I'd been looking at things very carefully with an artist's eye. And there I was staring at these creatures. And my brain had not learnt to see them. And that was stunning. That personal experience was stunning. They were beautiful, of course, and I love the countryside.
I think we probably talked about this the last time, but that was one of the ideas why colour blindness is useful, is because you see movement clearer.
Well, these animals weren't moving, they were standing there grazing or whatever, and they were, as soon as I saw them, it's impossible to understand how you didn't see them before, because they were really obvious. But until they clicked, I wasn't seeing them. It was strange. Of course, that was their intention, not to be seen.
Well, it didn't work very long, did it?
Not very long.
That's a shame. If only they were better at it.
Yes, there'll be more of them.
Yeah. Cengiz asked, have you ever been inspired from the formations in Yemen? Return, for example.
Well, Return really isn't from the Yemen. And I've never been, but I do have a couple of books on the Yemen, one on the landscape, one on the architecture, and both are stunning. And I would love to visit one day, but I'd love to go to Mars one day. I'm not going to go everywhere. I've resigned myself to that sad fact. What can I say? That's it.
That's a good point, though. So if you had to only be allowed to go to 5 more places before you kick the bucket, where would you go if you get 5?
Well, one of the places that I always love, whatever the view, is I love the smell of pine forests. People have asked me why I paint pine trees so much. The smell of the forest, when I was a child, I stayed in Troodos. My father was army, and we were based in Cyprus for 4.5 years on one posting. We went there twice, and we went to all kinds of places for holidays. Troodos was one, the Troodos Mountains, and we used to stay in commissioned army camps in tents, and as kids that was just fabulous. But what I loved about Troodos was the incredibly intense smell of the pines. It just riveted me, and it always gets me. So my number one place to spend time and hang out would be where I could smell that pine smell. There's another related smell which I learned to love in California, is cedar. So pine and the cedar, yeah, those two smells just are heavenly.
So you're doing the tour by smells?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
That's
So
yes. I'm travelling by
the
smell.
5 places you want to go are pine smells and cedar smells. What other smells do you want to smell? Do you want some spice smells, some mountain smells, some sea smells?
Actually, on the way up to Troodos Mountains, there was an incredibly rich herbal smell before we got to the pine trees. I would like to go to the Arctic or Antarctic. I would still love to go and revisit the American Southwest. There's lots of it I haven't seen. I really want to go. And I guess there's a whole lot of Europe I haven't been to. I'd like to see. There's so much in Asia I haven't seen. I'd have to think about this carefully, make a very long list.
No, you get 5, Dad, and you've already said pine smell and cedar smell. You've only got 3 more places.
Yeah, but you made up this number 5. I'm going to demand
it was my
more.
question. It was my question. I can say what I like in my question.
You can, but I can demand more. We all should demand more. Go on, love.
Next question. Mark asks, do you envision all of your paintings are from the same planet?
All my paintings are essentially from another here, another now. I don't think of them as another planet. No, I don't think that way.
So how do you explain things that don't obey our laws of gravity and etc.?
They'll get round to it.
Okay. We'll evolve rocks
There you go.
that float.
There we go.
Okay, cool. Kevin asked, what do you like to do when you feel the need to step away from a painting for a while?
I spent most of my life stepped away from a painting, and I'm desperate to step into the painting. I mean, I haven't picked up a paintbrush today. I picked up a paintbrush for an hour yesterday, and I loved it. But it's getting to it, which is the challenge. But if I was not painting and I was doing something I loved even more than painting, I would be building an environment I could walk around.
What do you like to do when you feel the need to step away? What do you do? I'm going to bring you back to people's questions. I know you want to answer your own questions, but we're answering people's questions.
Didn't I answer it?
When you step away from a painting, Dad, you don't go and build some architecture. What do you do?
Oh, God, I don't know. Make a cup of tea. Watch totally crap TV for 5 minutes.
That you'll blame on me.
Which I blame on Freya. But it's not true, because I don't care what's on. I'm just sitting down.
But he has been known to comment on Real Housewives of Orange County. I don't like her. She's always bitching about that other one. That other one seems quite nice.
You're not good for my reputation, girl. I love models. I got model aeroplanes, model trains. I love them. Don't get any time. I used to like collecting things. I collecting real calligraphy, handwriting, whether it's a 19th century ledger or even a 17th century Japanese book of poems, which I have. I've got chapters of the Quran that are that old, which is really beautiful. I've got those Japanese ledgers, which are really beautiful. I love calligraphy, and I used to love, well, not used to, not past tense, I do love engravings. I was stunned by coming across some Art Nouveau banknotes. They had no value. At least they were being sold for practically nothing. But they were so beautiful, I thought, how can you pass by and not stop at that? So I've collected engraved banknotes and postage stamps, not because of their value or rarity, just because of their beauty. And it's probably 20 years since I last bought one. So it's not an active hobby, but I do look at them from time to time and think that was beautiful. And they look beautiful as a page. I do, by the way, stamp collectors get particularly enthusiastic about what they call postal history, which is envelopes which are written and stamped and cancelled and all that. And I find that particularly interesting. I love Nick Bantock's work, where he faked postal history, he faked all kinds of documents. Check his work out, it's lovely. And I did a couple which were inspired by him on Fly From Here. I made some letters which had yes logos on the envelopes.
And the badges will be on the website very soon, and when you order one you'll get a nice little Roger Dean stamp on the envelope for those too, which will look really cool. And we did those ourselves, so we know.
A rubber stamp, not a postage stamp. But yeah. Okay.
Matthias asks, what was the inspiration for the Greenslade figure with many arms?
Dave Greenslade had an image of himself which he described as the composer, the conductor, the producer, whatever. And I was looking at the gestures of a composer, well, a composer would be writing, but of a conductor. And I added, in the drawings, I added them in to see which would look best and decided to keep them all. So for me, it was a fortuitous happenstance. I liked them all, so kept them all.
Does that happen very often, that while you're working on something, you'll sort of do something unintentionally that will then become...
It happens a lot. And I'm working on something with what I don't advise is a good way of working, which is to be very logical. And then something totally illogical comes along and knocks it for six. And the random illogical thing is often from a much deeper place inside your subconscious and often much more profound. So I listen very carefully to those non sequiturs of thought that come and barge their way in. So it's important to listen to what's going on in your own mind and try and not listen to the rational thinking, to edit that out and make space for the unplanned thoughts.
On that subject, I want you to mention Richard's quote today, which I really liked.
Oh yes, go for it.
Oh no, I don't know if I can remember. Did he say it was Eisenhower? And he said, a battle plan is useless. Planning for battle is essential. So I think I've probably messed that up, but the point was, if you've got a schedule of how things are going to go, that is not worth the paper it's printed on. But planning, that sort of envisioning and organising what's going to happen at the beginning, is incredibly important. And then after that you throw it out. But that sort of, is that the point?
I guess, yeah, the gist of it was don't depend on things happening the way you planned.
But plan.
But think it through before. Yes, but plan. Yes.
Harry asked, Freya, have you ever contributed any ideas or practical artwork for a Yes album cover? I don't think so.
Yes, yes.
But I thought Dad might say yes.
Yes, I'm going to show you because this is an important one.
Oh, I did something important. I not only did something, I did something important. What are you going to... Is this going to be something I did by accident?
This is
Alexa joining in.
I should tell you that it's a father's job to endlessly embarrass their children.
I'm not embarrassed. I'm sure it's brilliant.
Yeah, well, it was, yeah.
I'm trying to think if I can think of anything.
Okay.
I think I was too little, really, when Dad was doing most of these.
What I'm going to do is show you a picture of Freya, aged 3 years old, painting the entire background of the Yes Union album cover, painting called Guardians. Let's see if I can show this. This is the painting.
Yeah, that's visible.
That's her aged 3 years old, and she painted the whole background. And if you've got the cover or if you see the original, quite a significant amount of real estate is still there. I don't know if she contributed ideas, but she contributed a lot of paint.
And I've got even better since then, so check it out. Aldo asks about the references. In the beginning of your career, the references were more important than now? ? Now you're painting all from your imagination, or consider some pictures of trees and rocks. Hi from Mexico.
Hello, Mexico. The answer is actually references increasingly important. What I try and avoid, but happens all too often, is that a tree I love, I go back to and paint again and again from different sides. So there's a number of local trees that have appeared in more than half a dozen of my paintings. So I need to travel about a bit more. But the reference, it's not like a crutch, it's not what I depend on, but I love the fact that this part of my painting is out there in the real world, a living thing. So the spiritual need for that to be a portrait of a real tree grows rather than diminishes. And I do less and less from my imagination when it comes to things that are natural. My imagination is perfectly happy and busy with aspects of putting them together, composing them, and making things that are to be made by humans. But I love the fact that a rock or a tree is a portrait, and I go to increasing lengths to make sure it's a good portrait. So much more now than in the past, not the other way around.
Also, I think if you're drawing or painting something, it's very easy to fall into habits of doing certain things, even if you don't necessarily notice it, like making the left fork lower than the right fork in the tree. And so I think it's really easy to sort of, do 10 trees and suddenly you'll step back and realise they all have a fork in the same kind of place. Whereas if you're using reference, it forces you to break up your patterns.
That's absolutely true, yes. And the real world is different to what you expect. If a child paints a tree, a green top and a brown stem, they think the trunk of a tree is brown because they see wood all around that's brown. When you go out into the world, a tree can be almost any colour, but you have to be ready to see it. We depend incredibly on preconceptions.
But also you get punished for doing things out of it. So I was listening to a story that was exactly about this, and it was, again, Clarissa Pinkola Estes, and she was saying she had a friend who drew pink trees with yellow leaves and all of this kind of thing. And she told him, do you remember when we were little and you used to get told off for that? And the teacher said, trees are brown with green leaves. And he got very, very upset by this and decided not to do that. And she said, exactly as you say, if you look very closely at a tree, they're all different shades of silver and maybe, you know, violet and red. It's very, very rare you get just a brown
Well,
tree.
it's never one colour.
Yeah.
It's never one colour. Yes,
But it's that thing. It's not just preconceptions. It's that we're funneled into them as well. We're taught, don't diverge from.
It's how we learn to see. Actually, the eye is not a perfect optical instrument. It's incredibly imperfect, and it sends very minimal information to the brain, and the brain builds from that minimal information. And what a child does is its job is to keep feeding the brain, but the brain doesn't just take that information, it feeds it back. So a child will see what the brain tells it it's seeing, and to see what's there, in quotes, is an act of discipline as well as it is an act of discipline. It's an artist's act of discipline, but it's also the most wonderful spiritual journey. And I think seeing what's there is magical. It's absolutely worth all the effort.
It was making me think though when you were saying that, if children are really painting what they see, what kind of madhouse is in their heads? If we could only know. Like all these people with just circles for hands and like round scribbly eyes. And
Well, see, a child doesn't see that. They see what's there.
but they see their scribbly eyes and round hands as a human.
Yes, because
Yeah.
they're symbolic. They do a squiggle, and that's mum. And if someone comes along and says, "Wait a minute, your mum doesn't have three eyes," oh, and they'll take one out. But they won't have seen it as wrong until they're told. They'll see it as, "Oh, that's mum. That's mum." It's the same as writing mum. Mum is that symbol that they've marked, and it makes no sense criticising it, but it makes no sense not gently easing them into seeing, because that's the job of a parent or a teacher, is to encourage them, not to discourage them, but to make sure they see, because a child is being informed less by the eye than by the brain, and they have to learn to give the brain better information.
I was just about to tell a story about one of my students, and then I thought I better not. It's nothing bad, but I just had an incident where I was telling her, like, they don't look like that. Look at this picture. Can you see this thing is bigger and that thing is smaller? And she was just like, no. And then what can you do? Nothing. Tell them it looks great anyway.
Well, you should always do that. You should always do that.
And it did. And I'm going to give it away who this is, but she made something that was so convincing. I reckon she could have tricked her friends into thinking it was a real thing. But it was still not quite in proportion.
Okay.
Yeah, she'll get there. Sorry, we're not going through your questions very efficiently. And I'm sorry if I pronounced this person's name wrong. Bull? Gregma says about Japan mini LPs and the Lighthouse and variations of those, and that horrible framing on Thoughts of Moving On album. I don't actually understand that question, do you?
I didn't when I first read it, because we may be talking here about a re-release, because the albums, when I first did them, weren't framed. So I'm wondering what that is. So excuse me for not answering that question, because I don't really know what you're referring to.
I put it in particularly because I do like it when people put Friday Q before their question, and then I'm like, okay, this person's been watching.
I mean, I can say a little bit about that album. I did enjoy it. It was interesting for me to put a structure in, and that structure actually had a life again long after the album cover, because there's an episode of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Universe, the TV series, when they're sitting around a dining room table, and there's a model of that lighthouse with mice in it on the table. And that amused me when I was shown that. But thoughts of moving on? Have I got that wrong?
Don't know. Should we come back to it?
It might be a Nucleus album, not Lighthouse.
Well, this person thinks Lighthouse.
And I'm thinking Nucleus. Okay, well, you can see I'm confused.
Okay, Butch asks, Roger doesn't care for most sci-fi portrayals of the future. What would Roger like to see in this regard? Do you have any futurists that you are fond of?
Well, I can answer that question. A long time ago, we put together a project for a TV series to be made about the future, with Sid Mead and myself sort of driving some of the aspects of design. But it was back in the 80s, and one of the problems with that was it was very expensive making models for filming. And the idea in the end got shelved because it was such an expensive thing to do. But much more recently, Mark Stevenson wrote a book called The Optimist Tour of the Future, and a sequel called We Do Things Differently. And they were both incredible books, and I'd recommend anybody who's interested in the future get those two books, because they're inspirational and they're a good reason. They give you a very good reason to be hopeful. And when I'm talking to children about the future who are desperately worried about global warming and being drowned by seawater rising, I say we can fix this. Your challenge isn't to find a solution. Your challenge is to get the politicians of your country, get the politicians in the world to implement the solutions that pretty much already exist. I think we can live in a cleaner, safer, better environment. We just have to demand it. But one of the biggest, and my particular focus, is the incredible, ugly concreting over that's going on at the behest of planners and architects. They have to think better, and we have to make them think better by demanding more of them. They can't keep getting away with such unbelievable, oppressive and depressing pollution of our environment.
Mic drop.
However, we did actually go some way down the road to working with Mark on doing a TV stroke film of that, and we've got a wonderful treatment and outline which is being looked at by several people at the moment. So you might see something of this. You know, I'm optimistic. On you go.
On we go. Jonathan asks, can you offer this group to purchase prints of the two rocks images? Would mean so much.
Nice idea. We'll look into it.
Stuart asks, oh, that isn't a real question. I copied that without really looking, but that's a lovely thing. Stuart Kesting says, are you remotely aware of how much these sessions have meant to those of us locked down alone? I suppose that's not really a question, but that's a really nice thing.
Well,
Would
thank
you
you.
like to respond to that anyway?
Yes, I will. You can't imagine how much they mean to us. It's been brilliant. It's been wonderful doing this, and I'm ever so grateful for your input. It's been wonderful. I've loved doing it. Thank you. Thank you for your kind thoughts.
David, I should say something like that. I concur. That's lame, sorry. I agree. It's been fun, really nice. David Bagsby asks, would you consider a collection of your early spaceships, or perhaps an updated Dan Dare style narrative?
there is an answer to that question that's complicated. In the 90s, mid-90s, I was working with Hank Rogers on a project called Black Onyx, and there's a lot of the artwork we did for that in the book Dragon's Dream. And at one point in it, Hank invested a great deal of money, but at one point the project ran out of funds, and a company called Squaresoft invested and then stopped. And we were all stuck. The project ground to a halt. And I said to Hank, why don't we show what's been done to people in the city of London or New York? And he said, okay, go for it. And I did. I went there and we organised a small roadshow where we presented to investors and bankers what we'd done. And we got an incredibly positive response. But one thing they did say, almost universally, is we don't invest in a project or a game. We invest in people and companies. So we went away and repackaged it with a number of projects that were a mixture of story and interactive elements. Hank called it track and field, like in a game where you follow a sequence or where you can explore randomly. And the idea was very simple. It was that you have a story with a beginning, middle and end, or even a game, but you can stop at some point and explore. And it would be, if you were watching Blade Runner and you saw that street and thought, I'd like to pause the story and walk around the street and explore, go into shops. And that project got some funding. Again, it was all kinds of difficulties and problems, but that exists. Those stories exist. And there was one in there that was actually a full-on space opera. And it's a story I love. And one day, I hope that it'll come to the forefront of what we're doing and get made. I'm working with Alistair Audsley at the moment on storyboarding one of these projects, and that's going very well. That's interesting. So maybe, yes, a positive maybe.
Chris Lynham said the band Sigur Rós is from Iceland. You can do their covers. Very interesting post-rock band. I put this in. It's not really a question, but I put this in because I really like Sigur Rós. And then I was thinking, there's lots of great bands from Iceland and loads of music. Like there's this guy Thomas Barford I really like, and Björk, of course. Like lots of really great, interesting music comes out of Iceland for some reason. I'm going to play you Sigur Rós though after.
Okay, so
I
what's
put
the
that
question?
in really to make it wasn't one. I just put that in to mention to you.
Oh, there wasn't a question?
And just say Sigur Rós in case anyone knows them and can get Dad doing their cover.
You're not supposed to be doing propaganda here. Just answering
Just
questions.
a little bit.
Okay.
Okay, Thomas asks, do you use a template for the Yes and Asia logos, or do you paint them from scratch every time the logo requires a different colour scheme?
The Asia ones were painted from scratch, always. The Yes logos fit into several categories, one of which is the original with the very fine lines all around it. And I'll tell you a quick anecdote. I was signing a lot of books in San Francisco once, and a gentleman came up to me and I'd signed, and he said, can you draw me the Yes logo? So I drew the square one. And he said, no, I want the classic Yes logo. And I said, sorry, I can't do it. And he said, what do you mean you can't do it? I said, I can't remember how it goes. He said, that's rubbish. He said, I painted it 1,000 times on my school books. And I said, well, you may have painted it 1,000 times. I only ever did it once. I've never done it since. Because we did change the colours, but I never redrew it. But now I do versions of it, using the silhouette, but changing it. So The answer is yes. I paint new Yes logos. I change some on a standard outline. It works always, but Asia was always drawn from scratch, painted from scratch.
Nat?
It's difficult to say because we do work totally differently. Martin will address a project by making a model straight away. He does some sketching, but very minimal. He goes straight to 3D, whereas I would draw and pretty much figure everything out in drawings and sketches. So in that basic respect, we do things differently. He is much more intellectual and academic in the way he goes about things. He does enormous amounts of research first. I remember once he didn't have a camera. He wasn't a photographer, but he'd finished art school without going through that process of having a camera and taking pictures all the time. And I gave him a photographic job. And I remember when we were setting up to do the job, he'd read so much about it. He knew about gamma curves and all kinds of stuff. I had no idea you had to know. And he's like that with photography. He's like that with computers. He really knows the technology inside out and is incredibly thorough. When we did publishing, he was incredibly thorough and incredibly meticulous. For me, I like working with him because I could relax and let him get on with it. But he would be very grumpy with me, and that was sometimes very difficult. Yeah, it was very different.
Kaya asks, how does an artist figure out how much to charge for commissions? I always struggle with it.
There isn't an easy answer to that. Artists have two challenges. They have to earn a living, and very often artwork is considered a favour. It's we actually call people who are clever at art or music gifted, and it is part of a gift culture. But that doesn't mean you need to give it away for free. It's challenging. You need to work out. You need to be bold about it. And working out the fee is one thing. The other thing you need to do is be pretty insistent that you're selling the right to reproduce, not the copyright. You need to work out a deal that whoever's paying you doesn't acquire more rights than the job needs.
But also that the amount of hours you're working, you get the right wage.
Yeah.
So if you think a job is going to take you 20 hours and you want to make $20 an hour, there's one way of doing that aspect of it.
Except
but
it always takes longer.
It always takes longer, so yeah, take account of that too.
I mean, you may not be late in delivering, but you probably work harder and longer than you expect. Always, actually. In fact, I think from most people who are very good at what they do, they love it enough that they will keep working at it.
But it's a part of you as well. It's not like you're doing something unconnected to who you are. You're giving a representation of your identity and what you've achieved in your life. And if it's not up to scratch for you, you are just going to get that done to your standard. Otherwise it's just demoralising. That's the tricky thing, is making sure other people pay for that rather than you.
It's very difficult because of all the great artists that I've known, and musicians pretty much as well. No matter how much they've earned, they've always fallen foul of a crooked manager, lawyer, accountant at some point, and had to learn from a very expensive school how to do things.
Maybe one of our courses could be on making a business out of artwork.
Yeah, I take that course
Yeah,
today.
I was going to say blind leading the blind.
Yeah. Yes. I did say before that if you really, it would not, it sounds like a joke, but I think you should do a business course. That would make sense.
And the Open University have lots to choose from that are all free and you can do over the internet. So I highly recommend them. I've done courses with them before.
But I think she's writing in from America.
I think you can do Open University courses from anywhere in the world.
Well, look it up. Yeah, check it out. Okay.
I mean, that's kind of the point.
Yes.
Okay, so we're massively overrunning, but we've got 2 quick questions, if you can be quick with these. How does the commission process for new cover art occur? Contact from artist or manager? Do they provide input on style wanted? Tim asks.
I would say if somebody wants a really good portrait of an artist or a musician, I'm not the person to come to. So whereas I wouldn't welcome a lot of input in the way of style, I'd say make up your mind before contacting me, and then I'd be happy to talk within the spectrum of what I do.
I think they might just be asking sort of hypothetically, but...
Yes, well, I think hypothetically, yeah, there's a hypothetical answer.
Okay, there you go. Final question. John asks, your work with Focus has a very distinctive look and feel. How did you get involved with them?
I met them playing actually at Trading Boundaries, where I have a gallery, and I really enjoyed not only their music, which is really, I love their music. Tice is incredible musician and a really, really interesting guy, and we've spent many interesting hours talking.
So, as usual, I didn't get to every single one. I think we gave it a good go. So if I didn't ask your question, keep trying. The fact of the matter is the live filmings are only 45 minutes and we're trying to keep this about the same. Also, as Dad says, we've both got to try and fit in painting in and around these. I particularly do, because although I haven't done nothing, I haven't done as much as I should have done on my painting. So keep trying. Like, if we didn't get to it, just keep asking. We've got the live on Monday at 7, and hopefully we'll have the new course up. Only 10 places, so we're going to tell you on Monday where to go, how to book, and get in there if that's what you want to do. There will be courses following on. This isn't going to be the only one that ever happens, but this is going to be the one that's doing it live with Dad, because this is us developing it, and we want 10 people to kind of work with us in getting to grips with this and polishing it up, and from then on Dad will have a little less involvement, but this first one's going to be very special.
Let's talk. Good night.
Good night.